Welcome to the LDS Mental Health Podcast. This is a podcast for faithful women who want healing in their relationships, guidance from God, and internal peace. Each week, you'll hear mental health concepts taught through a spiritual lens from me, a licensed clinical mental health counselor, to help you start thinking in a higher and holier way. All right. I am so excited to welcome Ben Schilaty to the podcast. This month, we are talking about difficult topics, and I was really excited when he agreed to come on the podcast and talk about questions for a gay Latter-day Saint. So welcome to the podcast, Ben.
I'm thrilled to be here, Nikki. Thanks for having me.
Yes. So why don't you do a little introduction, a little bit about you, what you do, and tell us a little bit about your book.
Great. So I am currently a professor at Utah Valley University in Orem, Utah. I am a professor of social work. So I'm raising up the new generation of social workers. It's so exciting. And aside from that, I also have a part-time therapy practice where I work primarily with LGBTQ Latter-day Saints and their families. So almost all of my clients are YSA age. They are LGBTQ and, working on reconciling their faith and their orientation. And then every once in a while, I talk to some parents as well, who are also, struggling with, my kid came out, what does this mean? Or how do they fit in the church? Or I'm so mad, like, what do I do? That's the kind of work I do in therapy. And it's really fun. I'm originally from the Seattle area. I was raised by two convert parents who joined the church a year after they got married. And they meant it when they joined the church. And they also meant it when they got married too. So they love each other very much and are very committed to the church. Awesome. And I first realized I was gay about the time I was 11, but my mission was going to fix that. So I didn't really think about my orientation much until after my mission, when I was like, oh no, this didn't work. Like, I'm still gay. Yeah. And so when I was 21, that was the first time I actually admitted to myself, like, oh my gosh, I'm experiencing same-sex attraction, and now I need to fix this. And so that led to the whole decade of my 20s, trying to change my orientation through fasting, prayer, dating women, going to therapy, regular temple attendance, all these things that I thought could change my orientation. And that just didn't happen. And then when I was 30, I realized, like, this isn't going to change. This is part of who I am. And maybe there's a purpose to it. And so I came out publicly when I was 30. That was 10 years ago. And I started a blog where I would share my experiences being a gay Latter-day Saint. And that got me to meet a lot of other LGBTQ Latter-day Saints. And so I started a support group where I was living in Tucson, Arizona at the time, where I was doing my PhD. And then ever since then, I've just been actively involved in this LGBTQ Latter-day Saint space. So 4 years ago, I started a podcast with my friend Charlie Bird called Questions from the Closet, and where we take questions people have about our experiences and we bring on a guest to talk about them. And that's been so fun. And then I also wrote a book called, oh, thank you.
I love it.
And I also wrote this book called A Walk in My Shoes, Questions I'm Often Asked as a Gay Latter-day Saint, that Dedra Book published. And I also am one of the founders of the Gather Conference, which is the largest gathering ever of LGBTQ Latter-day Saints and those who love them. And I don't know when this episode will come out, but our conference is going to be on September 13th and 14th this year in Provo.
Oh, awesome. I keep hearing about it. So it's in Provo, and 13th and 14th, you said. Okay, awesome.
Yep.
I'll definitely post about that.
Coming up real soon. And we've got a great lineup. But this is only our second year, but last year, 1,300 people came. Steve Young spoke last year. He's not speaking this year, but Janice Cat Perry wrote a new song for it. We're going to sing that song again this year. It's just awesome. It is so fun. So cool. And the wonderful thing, the hard thing about being any kind of minority, in any way, is you have to explain yourself to people.
Yeah.
And it's so nice to be with people that you just don't have to explain yourself to.
Yeah.
I'm just this is a place where people get what it's like to be a gay Latter-day Saint. I don't have to explain why I'm a person of faith. I don't have to explain what it's like to be gay. They just get it. And it's awesome. It's one of my favorite times of the year.
That's so cool. I love that you guys are doing that. Who started that? Did you guys started that? Or
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm one of the founders. I helped come up with the name Gather. So
that's so cool. That's amazing. I love that. And you guys are doing, I think I heard on your last episode, you're doing something in Arizona? Or you did something in Arizona?
We did. That was back in April.
Okay. That was okay.
and hopefully it'll be a yearly thing. We'll have to
That's so
see.
cool.
We all just do things. We're all just doing it for free. We're all just volunteers,
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
you never know when someone's going to run out of bandwidth or just run out of passion for it. So as long as there are people who are passionate, and the Arizona one was the conference in Provo. We rented out a big space. So people have to pay to
Mm.
come, but
Yeah.
some really nice donors in Arizona paid for the whole Arizona conference,
Wow.
and so if we have people to plan it and money to do it, I think we'll do it forever.
That's awesome. That's so cool. I hope it keeps going. That's so cool. Very cool. Well, awesome. Thank you for that introduction. I'm glad that you mentioned your podcast. It is a wonderful wealth of resource information, knowledge, and I think is so helpful. I love listening to that. Tell me a little bit about what inspired you to write your book.
Yeah. So I just started feeling inspired to share my story about the time I was 28. This was 12 years ago.
Mhm.
I got an email. I attended BYU as an undergrad, and then as a master's student, and then I got an email like to the alumni listserv that was like, we're going to publish stories about people who had formative experiences at BYU, and I wasn't out publicly, and I read that email. I thought I have to tell my coming out story.
Mm.
And so I wrote the story about like me coming out as a 23-year-old at BYU to my two best friends, and I felt so good about it, and I submitted it for publication, and then it was rejected. I never heard
Mm.
anything about it, and I was like, oh, that was a bummer. But then I had this beautiful essay I'd written, and I ended up every time I would come out to someone, I would give them that essay and would kind of give us something to talk about. Like I wouldn't have to
Yeah.
always share the same story. And then when I decided to come out publicly on my blog a few years later, I already had this like beautiful essay that I loved, and so my coming out post was just that essay. And
Uh,
then people read it, and I saw what happened when people would read that, like just those few pages of my story. They would be like, "Oh, I didn't understand this before. Now I understand something I didn't know." And then gay people would read it like same, like I feel the same, like I feel seen reading what you wrote. And so the whole purpose of my book was I wanted to help other LGBTQI saints who have similar experiences see themselves in writing and know like you are not alone. We're going through the same thing. And also, here are some things I've done that have been helpful to me, and they might be helpful to you. And also, I wrote the book I wish my parents had had, and the book I wish my church leaders had had. It's all about how do you minister to someone like me?
yeah.
How do you minister to a gay person? So that was really the impetus to it. But also, I just love attention, so that was helpful too. Another good reason.
Well, it's a fabulous book. I hope everyone grabs a copy of that. We'll definitely link it in the show notes because I think everyone should have that and everyone should I think the questions that we're going to talk about today are sorry some of the questions from your book. But I think in the beginning of your book you have a really good caution and I think we should go over that before we jump into some of those questions that are in your book. And you say, I don't want to be anyone's poster boy. Tell us a little bit about that, what that means to you, and why you said that.
Yeah, so there's something I've experienced a lot so I'm single and a gay man, and I'm not trying to marry a woman. Like I'm not trying to be in a traditional
Yeah.
marriage. And in the past, I would come out to people and they'd be like, well, so and so is in a traditional marriage. Like this person is gay and they make this marriage work with a woman. And people would tell me like, oh, this person has this story. That can be your story too.
Yeah.
And I would think like you don't know my life, like you don't know the wrestle I've had with God, you don't know the experiences I've had trying to date women, like you just don't understand what it's been like to be me and how I have actively chosen to be where I am today based on my values and my personal revelation with God.
Mm.
And so I just felt really unseen by people who told me to be like someone else. And so I knew I didn't want anyone to have that with my story too. I didn't want anyone ever to say, well, Ben Schilaty does this, so therefore you should do it too, or you can do it too. So at the very beginning of the book, like a few pages in, I give this analogy that telling someone to be like me would be like taking the glasses off of my face and then giving them to someone else. And that would just give them blurry vision and a headache.
Yeah.
And we all have individual prescriptions for our own lives. We call that personal revelation. And so I want people to just like live their lives, like life that God wants them to live. And then with that same worry in mind, on the second to last page, I wrote this little paragraph. I'll just read it to you right now. I wrote,
Yes.
I have one parting request. If you are tempted to give this book to an LGBTQ friend or loved one, I would ask you to resist that temptation and pause for a moment. Instead of giving them my story, can you invite them to tell you theirs?
Mm. I love that.
And that like whenever I speak, whenever I give a fireside, that's always my message. Like, you heard my story and like, thank you, but you all have LGBTQ people that you love. Hear their stories. Those are the stories that matter.
I love that. That's beautiful. And that's my hope for today for this episode as well, is that I don't want this episode to be sort of that this is the way to do things, right? But my hope is that people open their hearts and their minds and allow people to tell their stories and get to know people and love them for who they are, and not sort of try to quote unquote fix people, which we as humans are love to do that, right? And be able to just hear and value someone for who they are.
Yeah, yeah. Can I tell you a fun story about like
Yeah.
writing my book?
Yes.
So I love answering questions, and so when I wrote the proposal for the book to Deseret Book, I based every chapter on a question, just in my mind to organize things. So I sent in this
Yeah.
proposal, and then when I sent in the manuscript, I took out the questions because that was just for me. And the editor at Deseret Book was like, "Where did the questions go? We loved that." And so then I put all the questions back in, and then the subtitle of my book is "Questions I'm Often Asked as a Gay Latter-day Saint." And so there are 16 chapters based on a question, and it just works really well. And then sometimes I'll have people contact me like, I have a gay brother or a gay daughter, or my friend is gay, and I want to ask them some questions, but I don't know how. I read your book, I feel inspired to do it, but like, how do I do it? And I'm like, bro, look at the back of the book. All the questions are listed on the back. Like, just
Yes.
you have a list of questions right there. So,
Yes. Yes. You have them
so
on your Instagram. Yeah, they're wonderful.
yeah, yeah. And so I just wanted to like help facilitate people having conversations with their LGBTQ loved ones.
Yeah, I love that. And I hope that's what happens today after you listen to this episode. So
Mhm.
let's just dive into some of those questions. And I think this first one
Yeah.
is really important to understand as a basic foundation. The first question is being gay a choice?
Mhm. Yeah. So the chapter I wrote based on that question is called Choosing to Be Straight. Because the
Yes.
reality is I chose to be straight because I was raised like I'm 40 now. So I was a teen in the 90s and early 2000s. And the cultural landscape was so different back then. Like I remember I think I was in middle school and Ellen DeGeneres had a sitcom,
Yeah.
and she came out on the sitcom, and then it got canceled. Like people just didn't want to hear it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't okay in society to be gay, and I didn't want to be gay. And my religion taught me to be in a traditional marriage. My culture did, and that's all I wanted for myself. I just wanted to like have this normal life. I just always wanted to do what was right. And so I had all these feelings of attraction to men. But I didn't talk about those. I didn't do anything with them. I wasn't looking at gay pornography. Like in no way were my actions gay in any way.
Right.
And that didn't start until I was 23 and I came out for the first time. But I was dating women and holding hands with women, and I kissed a woman. And so in every way, I was choosing to be straight and I was acting straight, and yet that still didn't change.
Yeah.
So for most of us, it's our orientation is inborn in us. It's not something we chose. It's not something we can change. It's just part of who we are. And and uh and yeah, that's just how it is. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think that's foundational for people to understand when they have a loved one who comes to them and tells them that they're gay as well, because I think that's really helpful for the understanding of helping and supporting somebody as well.
Yeah. And I have a wide range of clients, but a lot of my clients are just starting to come to terms with the fact that they're gay. And I'll have clients who say like, I don't like the word gay, I don't like same sex attraction, like I don't want any labels. And they'll just be like so embarrassed that they're attracted to people of the same sex. And I'll ask my clients, like, if you could push a button and be straight, would you push it? Like 100%, like 100% would push that button. I have these people come to my office who are just like so filled with shame and self-loathing that they would do anything to not be gay. They would do anything, and yet there isn't anything you can do.
Right.
And so, my role as a clinician is to help them understand who they are and get to a place where they aren't filled with self-hate and shame, but they can learn to move forward and thrive.
Yes. I love that. I love that you're supporting people in that. And I love that you're helping families too. That's such a
Mm-hmm.
needed niche out there as well. So kind of in line with that, the next question that was in not in your book, but the next question I wanted to ask was that I think a lot of people think in their minds is, well, then why don't you just marry a woman?
Yeah. Um, that was all I wanted to do because
Mhm.
that's, it's interesting. People will say things today like, why did you spend so much time dating women? Like, why did you spend your 20s dating women? And I would say there was no other option.
Yeah.
Like there were no role models, no paths to be a an openly gay single Larry Saint. That just wasn't a thing.
Right.
When I was younger. There was no way to be in a same-sex relationship and attend church back then. Like that just wasn't a thing. The only way to live the gospel was to be in a temple marriage.
Yeah.
And in my book, I even quote a few General Conference quotes where Apostle said, like, "This is the whole point of life is to be married to a woman." And so in my mind, I thought, well, that's what I have to do.
Yeah.
And so I tried that, and I share a story in my book about a woman I dated named I call her Emma in the book. That's not her real name. She gave me permission to share all the details, but she said, "This is a very personal story to me. I don't want anyone to know that this was me." And I
Yeah.
was like, "That's okay." So I picked a different name for her.
Yeah.
But I just like loved her so much, and we got along so well, and we just really clicked and had like a really beautiful friendship. And when we started dating, I had come out to her and told her that I was attracted to men. I didn't use the term gay back then, and she was okay with trying to date. And so, we were on a walk, and I said, "Can I hold your hand?" And she said, "Only if you want to. Like, I don't want you to hold my hand because you think you should." And I was like, "No, I want to," which was untrue. I lied to her. And we held hands, and it was a very uncomfortable experience for me. And then when we got to where we were going, I was very glad that we were there so that I didn't have to hold her hand anymore because it's like felt so uncomfortable, even though I like loved her and she's beautiful and we got along so well. And then we kept holding hands like while watching movies and walking places, and it just never felt comfortable to me. And I remember one time like we were watching a movie and I pretended that I had to go to the bathroom so I could get up, and then when I came back from the bathroom I just like sat with my arms folded because I just didn't want to hold her hand. And I
Yeah.
remember like we'd been dating for like almost 2 months, and I hadn't kissed her, and she was starting to get a little antsy about that. Like, this has been a long time. Like, eventually we should kiss. And so I remember just like getting up all my courage, and then kissing her, and just like feeling so like wrong. Like that's how it felt. And I remember like that I kissed her like right as I was leaving her house. And I remember like literally running to my car like a block away and saying out loud to myself while I'm running, like, "What have I done? What have I done? What have I done?" Because I felt
Mm.
like I was lying to her.
Yeah.
Even though I legit loved her, but I wasn't being honest with her.
Yeah.
And so like why don't I just marry a woman? Because all the parts of me that want connection, when I try and do that, it just doesn't feel right. It just feels wrong.
Yeah.
And I know that for most people, like they don't feel that way, but I do. And so, I just feel like it's not what's meant for me to be. And it's so interesting. I felt for a long time that God wanted me to date women, and I did. And then I got to a point where I didn't feel like that was being asked of me anymore. And I feel like God wanted me to have those experiences so that I and the women I was dating could have experiences of learning and growth.
Mhm.
And I'm really grateful for those opportunities and those experiences. But I don't think they were ever meant to lead towards marriage. And about the time I was 29, like those promptings to date women stopped, and then I stopped. And honestly, things have been better since then.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Like those experiences we have serve purposes in our lives and help us grow and help other people grow. I love that.
Yep. And
So,
and
okay.
well, I just want to say it would have been really damaging to me if people were like, "Oh, Ben, you shouldn't date women. Like, don't do that," because that's what I felt inspired to do.
Right.
And it's so important that we not prescribe for people what to do, but instead allow them to have a relationship with God where God can talk to them and trust their personal revelation. I talk to parents all the time who are like, "What do I tell my kid about this?" I'm like, "Don't tell them anything." You know,
Right.
they
Yeah.
they know the gospel as well as anybody. They know how to connect with God. Help them connect with God, and then trust the things that He's inspiring them to do.
I love that. That could be like a quote for everything, right? Is that we
Yeah.
don't need to be taking people's agency away, right? And their ability to make
Yeah.
decisions for themselves and their personal revelation is their personal revelation. And we should allow that, like, God could be telling me the exact opposite of what he's telling the person next to me, and both can be right because it's
Hmm.
personal to them and God knows everybody intimately and what is best for them and allowing them that ability.
100%.
Yeah, I love
Yep.
that. All right, I wanted to interrupt this episode to tell you about the first annual LDS Mental Health Skills Conference. It's coming up on November 22nd and 23rd. And at this 2-day virtual Zoom conference, you're going to learn some strategies and skills for managing holiday stress, setting and keeping boundaries, self-compassion, stillness, to-do list overwhelm, sustainable self-care, and processing negative emotions. This is going to be a jam-packed conference with mental health skills taught through a spiritual lens to fortify your mental health for future challenges. Also, to help you apply these skills after the conference, I'm also including 1-year access to the recordings of all the sessions and a PDF workbook that includes a year-long plan for the application of the skills you learned. To register for this conference, click the link in the show notes and be sure to use the discount code MHSC25 for 25% off your ticket. All right, back to the episode. So people might be thinking in their minds, okay, you know you are gay, right? You want to date men or you don't want to date women. And why stay in the church? What pulls you to wanting to stay in the church?
Yeah. So it says in Doctrine and Covenants, section 46, like the Lord lists all these Christ-like attributes, or yeah, not Christ-like, spiritual gifts. He lists these spiritual gifts. And one of the gifts is to know that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, and another gift is to believe on their words. And so, he set up this, like, there are knowers and there are believers. In a way, I was just like born a knower.
Mhm.
I have just always had a strong testimony of God, of His Son Jesus Christ, and even building on that, on the restoration of the gospel in the latter days. It just has always resonated with me. There was a time when I was 30, 10 years ago, and I had fallen in love with my best friend who was a man, and we ended up in what we call now a situationship, where we would hold hands and kiss, but we weren't dating because that wasn't okay. But we were in this situationship, and it got to a point where he was leaving the church, wanted to take me
Mhm.
with him, and I
Mhm.
wanted to stay and keep him in with me, and that just doesn't work.
Yeah.
And so our relationship ended, and I was devastated, like absolutely devastated. And the reason our relationship ended wasn't because of our incompatibility, or it wasn't because we didn't love each other. It was 100% because of the church. And
Wow.
so I was very upset. I was
Yeah.
very, very upset at the church. And I decided, this is stupid. I don't want to do this anymore. And so when our relationship ended, I like begged him to stay with me. It's so embarrassing now, but he said no. And it's a long story, but like I went to Peru for the summer. So we like broke up when I got to Peru. I came back from Peru 2 months later, and I was living in Arizona. He was living in Utah. I got in my car in Arizona as soon as I got home and drove up to Utah. And I was like, I've changed my mind. Let's be together.
Yeah.
And he said, Ben, I know you'd choose the church over me in the future. This isn't going to happen.
Mm. He knew
And
you.
so then
Yeah.
I got back.
He knew your heart.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so then I got back in my car and drove to Washington, where I'm from, and just like told my parents all these years of unsaid things I hadn't told them. Like I came out to them when I was
Mhm.
23, but we've already talked about it. And so I told them all the things that have been happening. And my incredibly faithful parents, after hearing me talk about this man that I loved, and they knew him, they'd met him, but they didn't know we liked each other, but
Yeah.
they knew him. And after hearing all this, my mom said, Ben, we're not just on your side. We're with you 100%. If you need to leave the church and marry a man, you and he will always be part of our family.
Mm.
And so they honored my agency. They trusted me no matter what I was
Yeah.
going to choose. And
Yeah.
so I decided, I'm donezo. This church is stupid. There is no place in it for someone like me. And so I decided I was going to quit the church. The only problem was between that day and Sunday, I changed my mind. So I didn't even miss one Sunday of church. So I was very bad at leaving the church. Um, but this is what happened. Like I was heartbroken about this breakup. And
Yeah.
then I would pray and I would read the scriptures, and like that broken part of me would like fill in a little bit. And I was like
Mhm.
so mad. I was like,
Mm.
I don't want to feel good reading the scriptures right now. I want to be mad.
Yeah.
And then I found myself one day that week reading in Matthew 26, and that's when the Savior's in the Garden of Gethsemane, and he says, "Father, if thou be willing, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but thine be done." And I kept reading. I know something I'd never noticed before, which is that the Savior then offered that prayer two more times. So three times he says, "Father, please get me out of this. But if not, I'll do what you want me to do." And I thought, I have been praying just like the Savior for years to get me out of this, like get me out of the situation. And I thought, but I want to, so it's Christ-like to want a way out, but it's also
Yeah.
Christ-like to do the Father's will no matter what it is. So I knelt down and said the most fervent prayer I've ever said. And I said, "Heavenly Father, what cup are you offering me?"
Mm.
And I felt the most clear and intense feeling that I was being called to live a life within the teachings of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints,
Wow.
and not to stay in the church, but to move forward in the church. So, you ask, like, why do I stay in the church? Like, I'm a knower. I'm
Yep.
also a believer, but also this is where God has commanded me to be. And when I follow the promptings of the Spirit, I always get to a place where I thrive. And that has
Mm.
been the case. And I am so grateful for the last 10 years in the church that I would have lost if I had run away. And I'm grateful for the decades to come because I feel like this will always be my spiritual home.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. I think it's it's beautiful to know that God is sharing revelation with everyone, right? And
Mm-hmm.
knowing that we can trust people with their revelation and that this you having that revelation has helped so many other people too, right? In what you and Charlie are doing with your podcast and your books. And so I'm grateful that you follow that.
Yeah, thank you, Nikki. And can I just add one more thing? I
Yeah,
don't want it to give anyone the impression like just because I had this experience, like, oh, it's been easy the whole time.
right.
I
Yes.
still have I still have moments of like pain and anger and moments where I wonder like should I leave? Like
Mhm.
there was a really hard general conference talk about 5 years ago, and I remember thinking like I remember like I had watched it at my house, and then I went to go see a friend, and I got in my car and I just sat down. I was like, I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
Like I do not belong here. Like
Yeah.
as a single gay man, I do not fit here.
Yeah.
And as I like sat there like wallowing in my car, like the thought just came to my head that line from John chapter 6 where a bunch of the disciples leave and then Jesus turns to Peter and he says, "Will ye also go away?" And Peter says, "To whom shall we go? Thou hast the words of eternal life." And I thought, well, where else would I go?
Yeah.
And that didn't make it easy, but
Yeah.
I also felt like, well, this is where I want to be. Like where else would I rather be than in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints?
And that's a good principle for revelation in general, right? Like because we receive revelation doesn't mean it's the easy path and doesn't mean
Mm-hmm.
that life gets easier or hard things don't come, right? Because I think a lot of people question revelation like, well, it was hard, so therefore the revelation must not be right. And that's just not
Mm-hmm.
true, that we're asked to do
Yeah.
hard things. And um I love that you said I feel more peaceful when I'm following the revelation that I'm supposed to be following, even though it's hard.
Yep, definitely. Yeah. And one thing that's really helped me, and I'm not saying other people need to do this, is just
Yeah.
like I did so much mental gymnastics in my head, like trying to make things fit. Like if something happened I did that felt like incongruent with my beliefs. And now I'm just like, I don't believe that. Someone said that thing that doesn't fit with me. But that doesn't mean I have to then like jettison the rest. But I can just say it doesn't resonate with me. But that doesn't mean I'm gonna just like get rid of the rest of it.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
I guess I give myself permission to like feel feelings and have my own thoughts and experiences, while also, moving forward as a believer.
I love that. I love that. That's a good segue into this next question because there are probably hurtful things, and you guys have done a few episodes on when the church comes out with policy or says things that are hurtful or general conference becomes hurtful, right? So what do you do when church hurts?
Yeah. I talk about it. I talk to people I trust about it and let them know what's hurtful. And I have just like the most remarkable family and people in my life where I can be honest and say like this thing happened and it's painful, and people just hold that pain with me.
Mm.
And I've learned over the years who to talk to and who not to talk to, because sometimes I'll talk to people and I'll say, this was hurtful. And they're like, and then I'll then explain away the hurt.
Mm.
And that's never been helpful. I just need to feel my hurt. And I remember one of those experiences. I was like talking to my friend on the phone and crying, and she was just crying with me. And then, there are all these kinds of things she could have said, but then as we were talking, I just like this line from Preach My Gospel came to my mind, which was, all that is unfair about life can be made right through the atonement of Jesus Christ. And I quoted that for her on the phone, and she said, I know it's true. And I said, I know it's true too. And so when we're with people who are hurting, they often end up saying the thing that they need to hear if we just listen and ask good questions. And that's the fun thing about therapy, hearing people like say the thing they
Right.
need to hear. uh,
Yeah.
but I'm just honest with myself about what hurts. And, my journal is filled with like me, sometimes raging about things that happen, but also feeling so good and peaceful about things that happen. And, an interesting thing has happened over the last year. Like I go to the temple regularly, and for whatever reason, like the endowment just hasn't been resonating with me. Like I just have it, like I'll go and it just feels boring, and then I'll be done and I'll enjoy being in the social room, but like the ordinance of the endowment has just like felt long and just kind of like a slog. And so I've been doing other ordinances in the temple. I've been doing initiatories and sealings and really enjoying that. But this one thing just like hasn't been resonating. Like, so this isn't about something being hard, but it's just like, it's not like fitting. And then
Yeah.
recently they shortened it, and I went back. I was like, "Oh, this feels good. Like this feels right
It's
now."
fast now. It's like going.
Yeah, yeah. And so I just trust that like we're not done.
Yeah.
Like the church has not arrived to where we need to be, and there is an ongoing restoration and more things to happen. And one of the things I pray all the time is that God will teach us more about the place of His LGBTQ children in the plan of salvation,
I love
because
that.
God's not done talking to us. He's not done teaching us. And so whenever something really painful happens, I think this is coming from a place of incomplete understanding, and God will give us more understanding.
Oh, I love that. I love that. That's beautiful. Yes. Yeah, I think about that a lot too. The church is not fully restored. President Nelson talks about that. And I love
Mhm.
that thought. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Yeah. Can I share just one more
Yeah.
story that's really
Yes,
current?
please.
So the church released some new
Yes.
transgender policies
Yeah.
just 2 weeks ago,
Yeah.
which I've got a lot of trans friends. This is really hard for them. One of my friends who's just like so faithful, a trans man, and he's been actively attending church for years. And so I've called him a couple times to like talk about what's been happening. And I said, well, how has church been for you? Like, are you still going to go to the second hour? Like, what are you going to do? And he said, I just can't right now. I just can't go to church. And I said, I'm going to take a month off and then see how I feel. And I said, well, you're going to miss out on these lessons, these experiences. Like, is there a way that we can worship together? And he said, oh, Ben, I would love that. Can we just get together and read the scriptures? And I said, of
Yeah.
course. And so,
That's
it has never
awesome.
been my experience. I need to like take a break from attending church. But for some people that is, but that doesn't mean that they then have to like lose their connection with God. And I want to be the kind of person that, as a gatherer, who, if someone is feeling like they don't belong, I'll say, come gather with me, come be with me.
Yeah. What a beautiful idea. And if anybody's listening to this and knows anybody that might be struggling and wanting to take a break from church, what a wonderful idea to minister to them and reach out to them.
Mhm.
So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, of course.
I love the experience that you're having. And one of your questions is, what have you learned as a gay man in a straight community?
Yeah. I am the most privileged person on the planet. Like I'm 6'3", like I'm very tall. I'm a man who is white, who has a PhD and two master's degrees, who's a native English speaker with hair. Like
Yeah, yeah.
I just like I just like have all like I'm the most privileged person on the planet. And I think in a lot of ways, like I miss things because I just don't see issues because they don't affect me. And
Mm,
so what being gay has done for me is it puts me into this marginalized category, and then that gives me the opportunity to like hear other people's stories.
mm,
And
yeah,
so it's been very interesting for me to like after people like hear my story, like this would happen all the time. I would be like, I'm gay, and I'd open up my heart and share my heart with them, and they'd be like, hey, something else is going on in my life, but this is what's going on in my life, and they would open up. And I remember this happened once with a friend of mine who had recently experienced a sexual assault, And I have never once, not in my entire life, been afraid of being sexually assaulted. Like that is just not a fear I have ever had. And then as she shared her experience of the fear of that happening and then it actually happening, like something just like broke inside of me because I just didn't know. And then as I talked to other women, I learned that some of them when they'll walk home in the like at night will like have their keys in their fist in case someone attacks them. I'm like, what? Like I've never even thought
Yep.
about that.
Yes.
And then and just like so opening up my heart has allowed other people to open up their hearts. And so I just, shared the experience of women, which is an experience like so outside of my own. But
Yeah.
that's happened in a lot of other ways too, that I've opened up my heart and people open up their hearts. Like I've learned about chronic illnesses and the difficulty of losing a spouse, all kinds of or losing a child to an early death, all kinds of
Yeah.
experiences that I have just never had because I was vulnerable and people were vulnerable with me. So it's given me a bigger heart for sure.
I love that. I love that. Yes. So we're listening to this, we're hearing your story. What can we do for our LGBTQ brothers and sisters in the church? What do you see, like maybe specific examples of things that we can do to administer better?
Yeah. So I'm going to give you two things to do. Okay.
Okay.
And they're both going to come from apostles.
Okay.
So the first comes from President Ballard, who unfortunately passed away not too long ago. And he gave a devotional at BYU in 2017, and he gave this invitation. He said, "We need to listen to and understand what our LGBT brothers and sisters are feeling and experiencing. Certainly, we must do better than we've done in the past so that all members feel they have a spiritual home where their brothers and sisters love them and where they have a place to worship and serve the Lord." Okay. So he gives us two invitations to listen to and understand our LGBT brothers and sisters. And then he says, certainly, we've got to do better than that. And so my first invitation would be, you got to listen. You got to listen to us. You got to hear our stories. You got to sit down with us and like get down in the mud with us and just
Mhm.
like what's it like being a gay member of the church? Like what's it like being trans? And then just like listening and then asking follow-up questions and having more conversations. And so I wrote my book so that I wouldn't have to have that conversation every time.
Yeah.
So if there isn't an LGBTQ person you feel comfortable talking to, like read one of our books, listen to our podcast.
Hmm.
So many of us are sharing our stories. So go hear our stories. That's the first thing
Yeah.
I would encourage you to do. Like be someone who learns, just like Elder Ballard invited us to, because that's what Zion building is. Like we build Zion by getting to know one another's hearts and minds.
Yeah.
The second thing is to talk about us. Like once you learn about us, then talk about us in organic ways. Now, some words and stakes will have like an LGBTQ fireside or like an
Mhm.
LGBTQ fifth Senate listen. And I think that's a great idea. But I think it's more powerful if instead of having like an event where we're talked about, we just acknowledge that like in every ward, there are LGBTQ people, not just one or two, but at least a handful. Like we are
Whether
in
you know
every
it or
ward.
not. Yes,
Uh,
exactly. Yeah.
Exactly. Like we are there. Like we are your cousin who is closeted. We might even be your parent or your child,
Right.
but we're definitely your friend. We're there, even
Yeah.
if you don't know we're there. So
Yeah.
I would say just talk about us. And so Elder Holland has done a really good job of this in two general conference talks. So in October 2015, he gave a talk about mothers. And one of the stories he shared was about a mother who had a gay son on a mission, and the gay son came home early from his mission. And Elder Holland said something like, he didn't change and no one expected him to. This wasn't a talk about being gay, but he mentioned us and talked about how no one expected this kid to change his orientation. And my phone lit up the moment he said that. Like all my friends saying, "Can you believe Elder Holland just said, like, this is so amazing?" And then in April 2017, he gave a talk about how there's room for everyone in God's choir. And he listed groups of people that have room in God's choir. And one of those groups was LGBTQ people. So what I would encourage you to do is if you're giving a talk or a lesson and you want to share a story of faith, or you want to share a story about tithing, or you want to share a story about hope, consider sharing a story, one of those stories that you learned about by hearing our stories. Consider sharing a story from a blog or a book or a podcast, and just make LGBTQ people a regular part of how we talk in church, because I can promise you that handful of people in your ward will be so grateful that you did that, and it will give them the courage to not be afraid.
Right.
And then if people just like acknowledge that we're there, like that will change so many things. That I started a support group when I was living in Tucson, and it grew to 36 members
Wow.
in the 2 years I ran it, and a third of those people came from my ward. And it wasn't because my ward had more gay people in it. It was because I was in that ward and I was open. And so they felt comfortable talking to me.
Yeah.
So one of the problems is if you talk about LGBTQ people in natural, organic, and positive ways, they're going to find you and talk to you.
Yeah.
And then you're going to have the most beautiful experiences of getting to know a bunch of God's children that you didn't get to know about before.
I was gonna say that's a good thing. That's a really good thing. And
Yeah.
perhaps creating that safe environment for people, right? Like that helping people know that they have a safe place to go and talk is wonderful.
Yep.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that just the basic skill of listening to understand. If we all just used that skill, right? Not listening to
Yep.
respond or listening to offer advice, but are we listening to really understand that person? And can we reflect back that we truly understand that person?
Yeah. And Nikki, I'm not trying to like upsell anyone here,
Yeah.
but I did a video course through Deseret Book. They have these Seek courses, SEEK, and I did a
Oh,
Seek course with them about the process of like how do you ask someone to share their story, and then I
oh,
model how to do that. So if anyone wants to know how to do that, like I have a whole like 40-minute course on how to do that.
that's awesome. Okay, I'm gonna put that in the show notes for sure. So you'll have to send me the link to that because I definitely
Mhm.
want to put that in there for people because I think that that's a wonderful resource. Thank you for sharing that. That's awesome.
Of course.
You have been a wealth of knowledge, and I appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing your story and also taking the time to come on the podcast. I know you're busy, and I appreciate you taking the time to do that.
Of course.
If people want to connect with you or find more resources that you have, what's the best way they can do that?
Yeah, the best way is to reach out to me on social media. So I'm on Instagram at Ben Schilaty. I'm also on Facebook. Don't send me a friend request if we don't know each other because I won't accept it. But you can send me a message and I'll see that. You can also email me. My email is just benschilaty@gmail.com. It's super easy if you can spell Schilaty, which is the hardest part.
Right.
But that's how people can reach out to me.
Okay, awesome. And you mentioned that you have a therapy practice. Is that open for patients, or do you want me to link that in the show notes?
Yeah, I'm full right now, but I can always put someone on a wait list. I'm only seeing a handful of clients right now since I'm working full time as a professor.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Very cool. And I definitely want to link the book in the show notes as well. I think everybody should grab that and grab the course as well. But thank you so much, Ben, for coming on and sharing your story with us.
It's been an honor.
Thank you for listening to the LDS Mental Health Podcast. I hope you were able to find ways of healing, guidance, and peace. If you liked this episode, please share it with a friend who would love to start thinking in a higher and holier way as well. Or hit that follow button so you don't miss out on any episodes. Also, check out the links in my show notes for other episodes you might like and links for other mental health resources on my website.